بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو الأول وهو الآخر وهو الظاهر وهو الباطن لا إله إلا هو لا إله إلا الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, in this talk, I'd like to conclude the first set of discussions that we've had on the Futuhat al-Makkiyya of Ibn Arabi. And with this, I think I'll try to summarize what we had said before, perhaps answer some questions, and prepare the ground, inshallah, for another set of talks on the successors of Ibn Arabi and how they played a central part in the evolution of what we consider to be key items of Sufi doctrine, or the doctrine of inner enlightenment and illumination. One of the major issues that many contemporary thinkers, theologians, philosophers have with Ibn Arabi is basically the way that the heritage of the great master has come down to us. Very few people have bothered to read through the Futuhat al-Makkiyya or any one of his innumerable works, which I think I said before range over 200. But the person who has done most to misguide people as to what the great master was about was a man called Ibn Taymiyyah. And he is the one who presented the terms upon which subsequent generations viewed the works of Ibn Arabi. The first and most damning and lasting accusation, which has no bearing whatsoever in the reality of his works, as I was hoping to expound on the last few lectures, is that Ibn Arabi's system is not really based on the Qur'an, and it is not based on the Hadith. It is merely the inhiraf, or the distortions of a mind that did not see the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the only means that we have of reaching the truth, which is the prophetic way and the Qur'an al-Karim. A reading of Futuhat al-Makkiyya and a reading of the works of the great master, as well as his own commentaries, should leave us with no doubt that the whole system of Ibn Arabi is based upon a true reading of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is a central element in his entire structure, in his entire process by which he reached these magnificent openings. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ also feature centrally throughout his works. His works are sprinkled with insights gained from readings of the Qur'an, gained from elaborations of the prophetic way. However, I say that with some caution. The way of Ibn Arabi is the way of all true seekers of inner knowledge who have reached the position where they are able to assess the apparent through the eyes of inner illumination and inner sight. And the apparent distortions, the apparent inhiraf, as we say in Arabic, that may appear to those people who do not have or cannot aspire to have the insights that come from kashf, from witnessing, from unveiling, is quite clear. It is possible to reach that conclusion if you do not see through the eyes of inner knowledge. So, the Quranic tafsirs, or the Quranic basis of an Arabic system, which subsequently became in modified form the doctrine of all the great tariqas cannot make sense unless it is seen through the eyes of dhawq, through the eyes of tasting, which comes from an illuminated and enlightened heart. An Arabi's way of approaching the Qur'an al-Kareem and the hadith of Prophet ﷺ are based on the two cardinal means by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to gain knowledge. The knowledge of the Qur'an and the knowledge of understanding the Qur'an is either bestowed to us, or it's mawhoob, or it is earned, which is muktasab. And each one of these two words, the bestowal of insights and the earning of insights, are the two processes by which knowledge is gained. The insights that come as a result of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowing us certain states and certain hals, which are given to us as a result of Allah's lutf and grace, and not as a result of our own exertion, leads to a certain way in which reality is seen in its totality. And that glimpse that comes to us, inshallah, who have been bestowed that hal that includes a level of inner balance, inner equilibrium, i'tidal, that allows us to see reality as it really is, allows us also to interpret and I say interpret very guardedly, because an Arabi is not a person who accepts the outer mechanisms of interpreting the Qur'an. It allows us to see the Qur'an in terms of our own inner reality. And what we see in terms of our own inner reality is true, even if it appears to contradict the great tafasir or the great interpretations of previous masters, because it is based upon reflection that comes from wahab, from bestowal by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the mirror of our heart that allows us to see these things. The earning aspect of knowledge comes from exertion, comes from reading, comes from reflection, comes from using what we talked about last time, our considerative, reflective faculty, an-nadar al-fikri. Both of these, when seen together, bring 2 points of light, 2 directions into one, and allow us to reach the reality and truth. We cannot doubt any interpretation of the Qur'an that is based upon its outer reading. The outer reading is correct. It has to be. There is no such thing as an inner aspect to it. There is an inner aspect to the Qur'an based upon the reflective faculty in man and the polished heart being able to see the other side of it. So any tafsir or any way of reading the Qur'an in terms of zahir and batin as being somehow in conflict with each other, and that somehow we in tasawwuf have the inner version while there's an outer version which is less real, is not accepted by the great master, and it is in fact, so I think I alluded to last time, is a form of discourtesy to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The zahir, the outer, the manifest aspects of the Qur'an are true, they are real. The inner aspects only are open to those whose heart has been polished to the point where it is able to reflect the bestowal of Allah's grace on that person in reading and interpreting, understanding that ayah. Both of these create a form of kashf, create a form of unveiling. And it is only through this kashf, through this unveiling, that the true meanings are illuminated in their totality, in their absolute reality. It is not that there is an outer version. I would repeat that because again it is frequently an accusation that has been brought against in Arabic and by inference against all those who follow the inner way. There is no inner aspects to it. There is only one reality. That reality has an outer form. The inner form cannot be understood by simply assessing and analyzing and weighing and rationalizing. It can only be tapped and accessed by a person who is able to rise to the level, to the hal, to the state that allows him to see with inner sight, with inner basira. For that, in order for us to understand that, there are also certain preconditions in reading the Qur'an and in reverberating, inshallah, the Qur'an. One of them is that we have to be in a state of taqwa. You cannot, the courtesy towards reading the Qur'an, the adab of the Qur'an, requires that you have to be in a state of piety or in a state of God-fearing awe as to what you're approaching. You have to be anchored in the Sunnah and the Sharia. You cannot read the Qur'an in order to achieve inner sight without being anchored in the true measure, true scale of the law. We have to also accept as a precondition that there are great walis, there are great beings in the past who have reached a state of gnosis, a state of ma'rifah, a state of awakening that gives them true insights, and their utterances and their sayings regarding these insights are true measures for us. We therefore have to accept the way of the great walis and the way of the imams as they relate to the prophetic way. Once all of these are done and we begin the process of inner grooming, will kashf, will unveiling, become a true measure by which reality is seen through the Qur'an. His main objection to the rational thinkers and the theologians who interpreted the Qur'an before him is not that reason in and of itself is not the measure, or is not a measure by which reality can be judged, but the scale of reason itself cannot be the scale. There's only one scale, and that is the scale of the Sharia. The measure of the law, the way in which we use our reason in order to start, the starting point of reason must be what we talked about earlier, the tarjih, the preponderance of existence over non-existence, and therefore the purpose of reason is launched from the launching pad of accepting the existence and the power and force and the creative force of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is using reason beyond seeking proof and evidence of the manifestations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and beyond tawheed that allows or that brings the speculative thinkers, brings the rationalists away from the deen. The starting point of reason, Ibn Arabi says, is not to question the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, astaghfirullah, or to question the essence, or to reflect as to how Allah acts or should act, or what are the various forms by which His essence manifests itself. This is not the purpose for which reason exists. Purpose for which we use our reflective faculty is to confirm every second of our existence the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply because there is existence. Reason confirms existence. Existence is the act of the preponderator, al-murajjih, as we talked about last night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tips the balance between existence and non-existence in favor of existence. The fact that we exist is ipso facto proof that existence exists, and therefore being is, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all. There is no point talking about any other thing. The fact that you exist implies that the act of the preponderator, al-murajjih, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has weighed the balance on one rather than the other. It is the misuse of reason. The misuse of reason in order to ponder about things where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us not to go, and where the Prophet ﷺ tells us not to reflect. Do not reflect upon the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not a subject, because not only does it lead to confusion, it can lead to kufr, and worse, it can lead to shirk, and that is associating others with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not recognizing the fact of existence as reflecting the unity of existence, and therefore the oneness of being. And from that he reaches the true meaning of the illiterate prophet. The Prophet ﷺ was known as the Nabi al-Ummi, the illiterate prophet. Illiterate, it has been accepted that it means that he was illiterate in terms of the knowledge of the written language, that he could not read or could not write. The Arabi says this is not what the illiterate means. The illiterate means a heart that can only absorb signals from the ghaib. It is not literate in matters of apparent reality. It is literate, however, in matters of cosmic divinity. As the divine signals come to the Prophet ﷺ, it comes to an unlettered heart, a heart that is not encumbered by knowledge of facts and figures as we see them. It is empty of all of that. It is only able to reflect and absorb the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore whatever comes from the utterances of the Prophet ﷺ is a direct pipeline from the source. It does not go through the manifestations of secondary causes. The unlettered prophet, the Nabi al-Ummi, has a knowledge which he calls the knowledge of that comes from illiteracy. Illiteracy as it relates to the dunya, but absolute literacy as it relates to knowledge coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the words that came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as they expounded in the form of his utterances and sayings, as they were of divine provenance in the form of the Qur'an, have to go through an unlettered filter. It's the reflective faculty in us surely must see that. The filter itself must not be contaminated by knowledge of materia, must not be contaminated by knowledge of whatever, of grammar, of physics, of economics, of sociology, of trade, of family life. This is the kind of knowledge which is not possible for that knowledge to be alongside the ilm al-laduni, ilm that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. So the Qur'an, when it refers to the unlettered prophet, it refers to the prophet as a person who is unable to do anything but reflect the divine reality because of his virtue of being unlettered in the materia of the world. That does not mean he did not have a side to him that was able to interact. But as it relates to his heart, which we have mentioned before, is the seat of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is uncontaminated and unlettered. The Qur'an is known as the Al-Jami'. It's another word for the Qur'an. It is the gatherer. It is also known as the Furqan. And Ibn Arabi stresses the two features of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is the Jami', the gatherer of all revealed books before that. In that form, it is complete. In that form, it absorbs, replaces, displaces, adds, and encompasses all that went before it. So the Qur'an, as the reflector of the divine name Al-Jami', combines within it all the wisdoms, all the ways of former prophets and all the wisdoms of revealed scriptures. And that's why it has that name to it, Al-Jami'. The name of the Furqan is the name that is given to the Qur'an as it discriminates, as it separates, as it differentiates, as it grades. Both of them are reality. The gatherer, gathering all revealed knowledges before, all the ways of the prophets, alayhim salam. And as the Furqan, as a separator, as a discriminator, and as the bringer of the scales and the measures and means by which all is weighed in the way of the Sharia. And the Prophet ﷺ, he calls Jawami' al-Kalam. He is the gatherer of all the words, all the revealed words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in time and beyond time. And that is where the comment has been made that the Prophet ﷺ was there when Adam was between clay and water. The role of the Prophet ﷺ in the creational order, in the order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given for the tartib, the ordering of creation, and the forms in which creation are organized. The Prophet ﷺ is the first manifestation of the Jami', of the divine name Al-Jami'. And from the role of the Prophet as the gatherer of all revealed knowledge and scriptures, in his cosmic sense, not in his physical sense, we have the Qur'an. And frequently, I'm sure you have heard before, that the Prophet was described when they asked Aisha, I believe, what was the Prophet like? And she said, he was the Qur'an on two legs. He was the walking Qur'an. He is the outer form of the Qur'an. The outer form in terms of its ordinances, in terms of its beauty, in terms of its literariness, in terms of its poetry, in terms of its law-giving authority. But he is also the inner form of the Qur'an, which is the gatherer of all knowledge and of all revealed information. So, the knowledge of the Qur'an leads us without reservation and inexorably to knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the knowledge of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and really to knowledge of all things in their true sense. So when you have Arifs saying that all knowledge is contained in the Qur'an, it doesn't mean you can open the Qur'an and try to read, Shakespeare or Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty. That is not in the Qur'an. We all know it's not in the Qur'an. But the reality, the essence, the ma'na, the meaning of things, the way things are ordered, the way things have within them meanings, the way things are brought into existence and tipped from non-existence into existence, the way things have certain essences, the knowledge of the essences, the knowledge of the origin of things, the knowledge of the origin of all causal phenomena is in the Qur'an. And there is no doubt about that, because if one reads, inshallah, with a bit of inner sight, through the lutf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are given that type of access, you will find that the balance is given and that you have really the philosopher's stone to knowledge of the nature of things. And that, inshallah, will lead to the absolute confirmation of existence and unity. Existence and tawheed. In the use of the hadith, in Arabi again uses his inner sight, has been graced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in seeing the true measure of the hadith. The hadith, as we know, are divided into various categories as to their provenance, whether they are absolutely authentic, whether they are partly authentic, and it depends really on the chain of transmission. And there's a whole science relating to the chain of transmission. It's called ilm al-rijal, the assessment of the characters and qualities of those who transmitted the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, in order to put them in certain categories. He does not do that. He looks at the hadith itself, sees it with his inner sight, and reaches conclusions as to what the inner substance of the hadith meant, irrespective of whether the chain of transmission is authentic, weak, or somewhere in between. Obviously, this whole way of looking at things is unacceptable to a great number of thinkers, of theologians, of Sharia-minded people, because it again puts things upside down. It tips the scales by which things are measured. And Arabi says that even a notorious forger of a hadith, if the hadith has an inner substance to it that is confirmed by other hadith, and most of all and above all by the Qur'an, then that forger may not have forged that hadith. to the contrary, if a hadith has the most impeccable chain of transmission, but does not give the essence of what the Prophet ﷺ could or did say, then he does not pay much attention to that hadith. Now this, as I said, puts everything upside down, and naturally the way in which he uses these hadith, the way in which he uses these sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, the way in which he reads into Quranic ayahs the true realities, that puts him obviously in great opposition to a large number of Sharia-minded people, and this whole system became under attack by this Ibn Taymiyyah. And Ibn Taymiyyah's diatribe, that's all I can say, because he spent nearly half his life just writing diatribes against the Arabi, has come down, unfortunately, to present time, which affects and inflects the perception of how Sharia-based tasawwuf is. And they basically have seized the argument. That I'm not trying to get into arguments or into taking sides here, but just to confirm, inshallah, to all of us who are trying to stay on this path, that leads to the divine commanding deeds. That is the tariq al-qawim. All roads lead back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the road that we have been told to select and to move along. This road, inshallah, has in it this way of looking at things that looks through into their realities. Last time I mentioned that, again, this division that we have between Sharia, Haqiqa, Tariqa, all that, this really doesn't exist in reality in Arabi. In Arabi says, the outer forms of reality are Sharia. The inner forms of Sharia are Haqiqa. Both of them are the same. It is not that there's some outer way called the Sharia, which we all have to abide by, which includes prayer and Sawm and fasting and Hajj and so on. And then there's the inner side to it. That's not how things are. There's only one thing, and that is reality, al-haqiqa. And al-haqiqa is a reflection of the haq, the real. Sharia, in that form, has an inner meaning. And last time I tried to describe to you how in Arabic derives the various ordinances of the Sharia, and the various ordinances as to what is permissible, not permissible, partly permissible, from the way in which creation cascades from the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be, and how this bifurcates as it reaches certain heavenly stages. Sharia has an inner reality, and the inner reality of Sharia is haqiqah. The outer form of reality is Sharia. Both of them, haqiqah is not ultimate reality. Haqiqah with Sharia combined together leads you to haqq, leads you to the real. He spends also a lot of time about the dangers that come to people when they have opened the door to the imaginal world, to the zone that we all, inshallah, are able to access. The world of the barzakh, the world where we see physical things spiritualized, and where spiritualized things become corporealized. In this imaginal world, it goes against, I suppose, New Age thinking and so on, about spirituality and so on. There is a world of the spirit, but the world of the spirit also has its pitfalls. It's the world where the shaitan also works. Shaitan is extremely active in the world of the imaginal, the world which is beyond the corporeal. In fact, I would say this is his main playing ground. It is the main playing ground not only of shaitan, but also of the divine name Al-Makar. In that world, in that imaginal world, a jungle, trying to live in this spiritual lovey-dovey thing does not work. You have to go into that world with a cool, calculated head and be guided carefully by a person who has been there. He denies the possibility of reaching, not the possibility of reaching the imaginal world, but of going through the imaginal world to the point of salvation, to the point of recognition of reality, without the guide, a true guide. At the same time, he says, this is also the field where guides who have been given the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open the door to the imaginal world have not reciprocated Allah's bestowal, and therefore act according to their own perceptions of movement in that world. And this is what he talks about, the failure of the pseudo-sheikhs, the failure of those who have genuine access to the imaginal world, but have not bound themselves by the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Sharia. He has a whole chapter on things associated with karamat, with miracles, with kharq al-awa'id, the breaking of habits, the tasarruf, that is the ability to control events. All of these things, he says, it's not that they do not exist. They do exist because breaking the natural law or breaking natural habits is merely a recognition that all natural laws are merely a constant affirmation of the self-disclosure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you a glimpse of His divine name that relates to change, that relates to the ability to fashion and make things, say al-sani', you will then be able to see that there's no such thing as natural law. There's only laws that are instantaneously true, but are repeated by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but can be broken if another divine name takes command. This breaking of what we consider to be habitual habits, or the habituation of natural laws. If you keep on dropping a coin and the coin falls, you think you know that it will fall all the time. It will fall all the time. But if you see through the physical law that commands that fall, and see that that law is merely a manifestation of Allah's command at that instant moment in time, you will know that there is a power, which is the power of the Maker, to unmake these laws. If you say, instead of dropping, the coin goes up. People with insight who have been given this grace, this lutf, this bestowal, and abuse it, except under strict conditions through the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he considers people who have broken the pact and the covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in reaching their imagination. Now obviously this also conflicts with a lot of proclivities towards people who miracle work or who have karamat and so on. He doubts very, very strongly that those who have access to the way in which natural laws are formed and can be broken are doing so in true ta'abbud, in true servanthood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last thing I'd like to talk about, inshallah, before we bring this talk to a conclusion, is in the last few sessions we've had a number of queries and questions about where does good and evil fit into the system. How is the good that comes, the khair that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be balanced against the manifest evil that we see? And talking it away by saying, well, all else is subsumed under the good, and therefore what we see as evil now, seen from a different perspective, is not necessarily evil, is an erroneous way of looking at this central question. The Arabi says, all good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all khair comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and good is one of the names that combine the divine names, Asma Allah al-Husna, the most beautiful names of Allah. So Allah's names are all beautiful. Good comes from Allah, being, therefore, is good. He says evil is the lack of good. Therefore, evil, if Allah as being manifests existence, and Allah is good, evil is non-existence. Evil is the lack of good. Where good is not there, i.e. existence is not there, then non-existence is, and non-existence is evil, because non-existence is opposed to the creative act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All creatures are brought out of, this is really the key point for us, I think, also to differentiate between how evil can be a choice of man, while good is only Allah's. Creatures, all existent entities, as we discussed earlier, are brought into existence from certain immutable entities, al-ayan al-factor. They are tipped into existence. They are tipped into existence from where? From non-existence. The creative act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in bringing the cosmic order in all of its manifestations into being is tipping things from non-existence, which he equates to lack of good and therefore evil, into the potential of being absolutely good. So existence looks, on one side, he says, it gazes at the good. All of us, human beings, animate entities, inanimate entities, spiritual beings, we are all created out of this ayn al-thabta, out of this immutable blueprint in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tipped into existence as a result of His mercy, in order to show creatures the difference between existence and non-existence. Inshallah, I'll come to an ayah from Surah Maryam that specifies that in the Qur'an. So we're not just hallucinating here. This is anchored in the Qur'an. Evil is where the existent entities look at their non-existence. And the whole purpose of bringing us into existence is in order to see non-existence and move towards existence. So existence, wujud, is what being is about, and it is good. And non-existence is the state from which Allah tipped us in order to see good. The choice we have, there are two commands, the Arabi says. There's the command to be, which we have no question about. We are. It's an amr al-takwini, the commanding order. We are, I am, you are. We cannot do anything about it. We have no choice. Then he calls the amr al-taklifi. When he brings us into existence, he tells us, look this way, this is good. Look that way, this is non-existence. And the choice is ours. And that choice, he sends with it, as it is necessary. It is part of the order of creation. When created entities are, they are brought into being, then they are given a choice. There must be a rule book for this choice. And that rule book is the immutable law given to us by the perfect man, by the Prophet ﷺ. So, evil is a choice that is offered to us in order to recognize good. And the fact that it exists, it manifestly exists at our level. It exists because we gaze that way rather than the other way. The whole process of creation, in Arabi says, is to be able to understand the good in order not to slip back into non-existence. Let me just read you, inshallah, Surah Maryam, ayah 19. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allah says, does not man remember that we had created him before from non-existence? So the creative order that applies to all entities is the order kun, be. The creative order that applies to the spirits is the divine question, Alasta bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? The spirits that are within us that point to the unicity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the absolute oneness and divinity, are within us. But there is no doubt about it. We have been tipped into existence. There's a blueprint. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Maryam, do you not remember that we had created you before out of non-existence? So we were tipped into existence, and then we were arrayed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we made a covenant with Him. Evil comes as a result of us not recognizing this covenant. Evil comes as a result of us gazing at non-existence and believing its existence. And evil comes when we do not guide our actions by the perfect model of the Prophet ﷺ and by the scale of the Qur'an, and of the inner and outer aspects of the Sharia. Alhamdulillah. At this point I shall stop. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts, observations?
Is that the same as saying that we are unreal, or were of the unreal world? That Allah is real and we are unreal?
Yes, I mean it is one way of ascribing reality to only Allah. We are a form of reality only in as much as we are able to reflect the divine characteristics. We become real the more we live according to the pattern prescribed to us, the more we raise our inner state and consciousness, the more we take on the noble characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, of the great walis in the past, and the more we are able to internalize in our being the commanding divine names. The less you have of that, you are real. Of course, we're real physically. I mean, you can hit yourself and you know you're real. But this kind of reality is only valid at a certain level. It is not valid at the level of raising your knowledge and awareness. Raising your knowledge and awareness requires that you have an infallible guide and the yardstick. And the yardstick must be the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form of the divine names. The more we understand that this is reality, and what we have is a form of reality. It's not unreal, it's a form of reality. The better it is for us and for, inshallah, our way, our path. It's not that we are not real. It's not that we are all spiritual beings somehow trapped in this world and so on. No, this world is necessary for us in order for us to see the actions of the secondary causes, of the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can you reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or reach the state of proximity if you do not see around you all the time His manifestations? So again, I mean, the kind of true tasawwuf, true inner enlightenment within Islam